the Napoleonic Wars. We're going to chart the incredible rise and the dramatic fall of a figure who was, brilliant, fascinating, and, yeah, really controversial.
And really, the whole thing boils down to this one kind of mind-blowing question. How on earth did a boy from a tiny, impoverished island, a place most people couldn't even point to on a map, become the Emperor of Europe? I mean, how does that even happen? Well, let's get into it.
So, our story doesn't actually kick off in Paris. Nope, we're starting on the rugged island of Corsica. And here's the thing, right before Napoleon Bonaparte was born, France had just conquered the island. And you can bet that a young, super proud Napoleon was, let's just say, not a fan of that.
Yeah, his whole early life was basically defined by being an outsider. His family, they were minor nobility, which was just enough to scrape him into a military school in France. But once he got there, man, he was relentlessly bullied for his Corsican accent, his background, the whole deal. So he spent most of his time by himself, just burying his nose in books. He got really, really good at stuff like math and geography, skills that would come in super handy down the road.
But here's the problem, right? Napoleon was just overflowing with ambition. But in pre-revolutionary France, that meant nothing. It just didn't matter. In the army, promotions went to guys with fancy titles and rich dads, not to the person who was actually good at their job. So he was stuck. He had a ceiling over his head. But then, everything was about to change. An event was coming that would blow that whole system to pieces.
I'm talking, of course, about the French Revolution. It just completely tore down the old way of doing things, and that created this massive power vacuum. And for a guy like Napoleon, with his specific skills and that burning ambition, well, this was the opportunity of a lifetime.
I mean, just look at how fast this all happened. It's staggering. We're talking about a little over 10 years to go from being a pretty junior officer to the most powerful man in France. He wins these incredible victories, defends the revolution, grabs power in a coup, and then, the final move, he crowns himself emperor. It's like a rocket ship to the top.
Now, being a military genius wasn't his only play for climbing the social ladder. Oh no, he also married Josephine. She was older, she was super well connected, and, well, she had a bit of a reputation, This quote here, and who knows if he really said it, but it perfectly captures the kind of awkward social world he was trying to force his way into.
See, after years and years of revolutionary chaos, Napoleon brought order. He rolled out the Napoleonic Code, a whole new legal system. He created a national bank, rebuilt infrastructure, he got France back on his feet. And once he did that, he dropped this absolute bombshell of a quote. He was basically saying, the messy part is over. I'm what comes next. I am the revolution. He wasn't just a general anymore. He was the end game.
Okay, so France is stable, it's under his thumb. What's next? Well, Napoleon turns his eyes to the rest of Europe. And all the old-school monarchies, we're talking Austria, Prussia, Russia, they're all looking at this upstart emperor and the radical ideas he stands for. And you better believe they started getting very nervous.
So how was he so successful on the battlefield? A huge piece of the puzzle was his corps system. It was genius, really. He broke his massive army down into smaller, independent mini-armies. Think of them like self-contained units that could do everything on their own. This meant they could ditch the slow, plodding supply trains, live off the land, and just move at a speed that was, well, unheard of. His enemies were constantly baffled. He'd surround them before they even realized he was there.
And if you want to see this genius in action, look no further than his masterpiece, the Battle of Austerlitz. This is just brilliant. He intentionally made his army look weak and vulnerable, even giving up the high ground. He sent a message to the Russian Tsar that was basically like, "Oh no, please don't hurt me. I'm just a little guy. I'm so scared." And they totally fell for it. The Allies took the bait, charged right down, and walked straight into his trap. It was just a masterclass in tactics and mind games.
But there was one nagging problem, one enemy he just couldn't crush. Great Britain. Big island, giant navy, he couldn't invade them. So he thought, okay, if I can't beat them with cannons, I'll beat them with economics. He came up with something called the Continental System. Basically, it was a massive economic blockade. He told the rest of Europe, nobody trades with the British, nobody. And that one decision, boy, was it gonna backfire. So Napoleon is at the absolute top of his game. He's the master of Europe. And right then, at the peak of his power, he makes two fatal mistakes. Two catastrophic blunders that would be the beginning of the end for his entire empire.
Mistake number one, Spain. In a move of pure arrogance, he just dethroned the Spanish king and put his own brother on the throne. He seemed to think they'd be grateful. Instead, the entire country just exploded into a brutal, bloody guerrilla war. They called it the Spanish ulcer because it just wouldn't heal. It was this constant draining sore on his empire, sucking up troops and resources in a war he just could not win.
And the second mistake? Oh, it was even bigger. Remember that continental system? Well, Russia decided they were done with it and started trading with Britain again. Napoleon was absolutely furious. So to teach the Tsar a lesson, he assembled the largest army Europe had ever seen. We're talking more than 600,000 soldiers, and he marched them all towards Moscow.
The invasion was an absolute cataclysm. The Russians played it smart. They refused to give him the big, decisive battle he wanted. They just kept retreating and retreating, burning everything as they went. By the time Napoleon's army got to Moscow, it was an empty, smoldering ruin, and the brutal Russian winter was setting in. The retreat? It was just a nightmare, an absolute horror show. His legendary Grande Army was practically wiped out, and with his army gone, all of his enemies could smell blood in the water. For the first time, Napoleon was truly vulnerable.
And that brings us to the final act. A much weakened Napoleon now has to face pretty much all of Europe united against him. It's a story that includes his first defeat, a comeback that nobody saw coming, and of course, one of the most famous battles in the history of the world.
So he's defeated, he's forced to abdicate, and the Allies ship him off to this tiny little island called Elba. And here's the funny part, they let him keep the title Emperor, so he's now the Emperor of Elba. But you got to imagine, for a guy who used to run a whole continent, being stuck on a little island was, well, it was boring. And as everyone was about to find out, a bored Napoleon is a very, very dangerous Napoleon.
And yeah, he escaped. He landed back in France, and his old soldiers flocked to his side for one last desperate roll of the dice. For a period known as the 100 Days, he was back in charge, but Europe wasn't having it. They marched against him, and at a little place called Waterloo, he was finally and completely defeated. This time there was no coming back. The exile would be for good. So, after all that, what do we make of him? What's his legacy? And this is the great debate, right? On one hand, you have the hero who saved France from chaos, the guy who spread modern ideas like legal equality and promotion based on talent all across Europe. But on the other hand, you have a tyrant, an absolute dictator whose personal ambition led to more than a decade of constant, brutal war. So which is it? The truth is, it's really complicated. Oh, and we have to talk about the height thing. We just have to. The biggest myth about Napoleon is that he was this tiny little guy. The truth? He was about 5'6". For a Frenchman at the time, that was completely average. The whole short man thing was basically just really effective propaganda cooked up by the British.
And that really leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? Who was this guy? Was he a visionary genius who dragged Europe into the modern age? Was he a power-hungry monster who caused the deaths of millions? Or could he have been both at the same time? It's that complexity that makes him so fascinating, and it's why we're still talking about him and arguing about him to this very day.